Dear students, welcome back to the zoology lecture module. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is our lecture number 9. But the point which is to be noted is that this is lecture number 9 pertaining to animal kingdom. But there is an important point which you have to remember, that this lecture is in continuation. This is in continuation with lecture number 8. So we were discussing reproduction. We analyzed different modes of reproduction in animals, and we saw that some of the animals will perform asexual reproduction, some will perform sexual reproduction. We then saw that some will perform internal fertilization, some will prefer external fertilization. There'll be some sexually reproducing organisms which will be hermaphrodite, some will be dioecious, unisexual, and we saw that hermaphrodite organisms may show protandry or protogyny. This stuff we have already understood in lecture number 8. Dear students, I have given you this information about the development of young ones. Like animals could be oviparous, they could be viviparous or ovoviviparous animals. Okay, now let us see the difference between direct and indirect development. We need to understand what do we mean by direct development and indirect development. After that, we will understand even some more topics. Let us take development a bit more. We'll see some animals which undergo direct development. Here we are talking about this thing. So here we have a sperm. This is common with all animals. Sperm, it fuses with ovum. What is this process called? This is called fertilization. Yes, let me write down. What is this process called? This process is called, what is this? Okay, let me write down. What is this? Basically fusion of gametes. Okay, what is this fusion of gametes called? It's called fertilization, correct? After fertilization, what is going to be formed is basically the zygote. There will be a single cell formed, okay, which we call zygote. And this zygote is then going to form the embryo. Let me make it simple over here, okay. Once we studied about the levels of the organization and back in the body plan, I taught you about what is basically formed first. It's morula, the mass of cell, and then you saw the blastocyst. Here we are talking about in simple terms. We say that an embryo is formed, a mass of cells is formed. You can remember this mass is going to be, either having 2 layers or 3 layers, what we call ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Here we're talking about talking in simple terms. Like we have first of all this one cell, then it will divide into a mass of cell, what we call embryo, and then this embryo is going to develop. It's going to develop into a young one, into a new organism. So in that, this is what I'm talking in this term. What we call this process is development. Now you'll see some organisms which perform direct development. And some of the animals will show what? They will show indirect development. See the difference? Now you can guess what is direct development. Here you will see that the embryo, or we can say simply the egg. Let us consider that this form, let me call it egg, say for example, this stage, okay? Egg will directly develop, or the embryo will directly develop into the young one. So direct development, egg to young one stage, okay? This is the case what is happening over here. You can guess, okay? The embryo will be developed into the young one. But in indirect, what you'll see is that here, the egg, it will first be converted, or it will form a larva, okay, and then larva will develop into pupa, and pupa will then develop into the young one. See, so the development is not direct. You're not getting from egg the young one. There are 2 further intermediate stages which are formed, larva and pupa. You study these things in lower classes when the teacher teaches you about the life cycle of, say for example, the butterfly. Often you see the same thing, where the teacher teaches you that it was initially a caterpillar, and then it developed into a butterfly, and you come across the stages like larva, initially it was, then it became the pupa, and so on. Similarly, you must have gone through the life cycle of frog in lower classes. Again, you will see that the frog is going to not become the frog immediately. It has to pass through a stage which is called tadpole. So you'll have a tadpole formed first, that will develop into the frog. So here you will see in both the cases, in the case of butterfly, in the case of tadpole, you will see that there are certain larval stages involved. Development is not direct. Obviously, you can use the word indirect development for such cases, for such animals. Okay. Now this conversion, this change from egg to larva to pupa to young one, this change is called, yes, any guesses? Absolutely correct. This change is called metamorphosis. What is it called? Metamorphosis. So once you see this thing happening, you have the egg which is forming the larva, and larva developing the tadpole, then developing into frog, or you see the caterpillar first and then caterpillar developing into the butterfly. What do you call these changes? You call these changes, you call this process rather, metamorphosis. Okay. So you'll see that metamorphosis is also of two types. Metamorphosis is also of two types. Now, what are those types? So let me quote. Metamorphosis is again of two types, very simple. You have progressive, some animals showing progressive metamorphosis, okay, and some animals showing retrogressive metamorphosis. So you have progressive metamorphosis, retrogressive metamorphosis. So these are the two types. Now, what is the difference? In progressive metamorphosis, what you see is that the larva is not that much developed. Larva is simple. So initially, let me quote like this. Let me pen it down like this. So here initially, that means in the beginning, larva is having simple structures. Initially, larva is simple, having simpler structures in it. But as it develops, so as this larva develops, as it develops, you will see that in this larva, complex structures will appear. If you'll see metamorphosis in this way, like you see the initial in the organism, the initial larva, you'll see that initial larva with very simple organs and organ systems. But as this larva will develop further, you'll see that it will start showing complex structures in it. That means the complexity of this larva will increase with the passage of time. If that type of metamorphosis is happening, you will call it progressive, because you see that the organism is progressing towards complexity. That's why you call it progressive metamorphosis. Retrogressive is the opposite. In retrogressive, you will see that the larva is having more advanced structures initially. So initially here, larva is advanced. So larva is advanced. What do I mean by advanced? Is that larva is having some advanced structures initially. But as the larva develops more, it loses its complex structures. Okay, we'll see as it develops. Let me put an arrow. As it develops, we'll see that complex structures of the larva are lost. So it's reducing its complexity. The larva is becoming less complex. So it's a kind of retrogression, it's a kind of reduction. That's why we call it retrogressive. You can see, have you ever made a diagram of tadpole as far as frog is concerned? Once we show the tadpole, we make a structure which has tail also. So a tadpole is comparatively complex than a frog because it can swim. Okay, but if you see frog, in that this tail disappears. So can't we say that the larva, that means a tadpole, had some complex structure? It had some complexity. But as it developed towards the adult, as it became the adult, it lost its complex structure like this tail. So you'll see frog and Hibernania also. Hibernania, which is sea skirt, in them you will see that the tail disappears with the passage of the time. As the individual becomes adult, this tail is lost. So in case of frog, you will see retrogressive metamorphosis. In case of Herdmania, again you will see what? In case of Herdmania, I'm not able to write it over here. In case of Herdmania, again you will see, okay, let me write down over here. In case of Herdmania, you will see the same retrogressive metamorphosis. The difference is like in progressive, the larva is very simple initially, and as it develops towards the adult, it acquires, or it starts developing complex structures. But it's totally opposite with retrogressive. If you look at retrogressive, we'll see the larva initially was having advanced structures like the tail in tadpole, and as this tadpole converted into a frog, we see the tail disappears. So the complex structure was lost. That type of metamorphosis is called retrogressive metamorphosis. Okay. Before we say that we have understood about the diversity of animals, and we have considered all the different dimensions, we have considered and we have analyzed all the different parameters in which animals could vary from each other, be it the organ systems, be it the symmetry, be it the habitat, so on and so forth. We have one more aspect to analyze, that is body temperature. Body temperature is another factor which is going to divide animals into two categories. You'll see one category of animals which are homeotherms. Homeotherms. And there is a second category of animals which are called poikilotherms. Okay, so you have these two types of animals based on the body temperature. I'll make you understand what does it mean. Homeotherms, you commonly call them, you use the word warm-blooded. These are the warm-blooded animals, and these are, yes, absolutely, they are cold-blooded animals. Okay. Now, what are warm-blooded animals? My dear students, these are the animals who will always maintain their body temperature. They always keep their body temperature maintained. So they maintain their body temperature. So they have to keep their body at some optimum temperature. It doesn't matter what is the outside temperature, irrespective of outside temperature. Let's write down this also. Irrespective of outside temperature. So whatever is the condition, whatever is the temperature outside, that doesn't matter with these animals. They have to maintain their own body temperature. Examples for this category are mammals and birds. Mammals and birds, they have to maintain their body at an optimum temperature. So their body temperature is fixed, and they have to maintain that fixed temperature. That's why we call them warm-blooded animals or homeotherms. See, they have some adaptations, like if there is extreme hot outside. See, if there is extreme hot outside, what they can do is they can sweat. Okay, they'll sweat, and in that way, their body temperature will become normal, or they will feel the coolness. And if it's exclusively cold outside, if there is they have to show adaptation. If we are saying they have to maintain the body temperature, but we have to keep into consideration that external environment is not going to be always favorable. Now they will have some adaptations to maintain the body temperature. One adaptation is like if there is extreme hotness, they can show this feature of producing sweat, by which they can feel the cool, they can make their body feel cool. And if there is extreme cold outside, what they can do is that they can reduce, let me write down, they can reduce the flow of blood to the skin. Now, what is that going to do? Let me make you understand. We know that the blood is a kind of thermoregulator. Blood is the tissue which is going to keep your body warm, because blood itself is warm. So that is going to distribute the warmth towards in your body. So your body becomes warm because of the flow of the blood in it. Now, if you want to conserve your heat, what your body has to do, it has to restrict the flow of blood to the skin, because we know if the blood will flow to the skin and external environment is very, very cold, if external environment is cold and your blood flows to your skin, you can think what will happen. Your heat will be lost to the environment, and you don't want that to happen. So what your body will do in these cold temperatures, your body will reduce the flow of the blood to the skin. In that way, what is the benefit is that the heat which is in the blood is retained. That is retained by your body. When the heat is retained, because the warmth of the blood is not lost, because you restricted the flow of the blood to the skin. Now the heat is retained. Obviously, you will feel warm. Okay, you will feel warmth. And even you will see that goosebumps will appear. Not only the blood flow will be reduced, even you will see that you will feel goosebumps on your skin. That is another adaptation which will prevent the loss of heat to the surroundings. So in these two simple ways, the homeotherms will be able to maintain their body temperature. Okay. Now what is the case with poikilotherms or cold-blooded animals? They are going to switch their body temperature as per the surroundings. See, if external temperature will rise, let me write down. If external temperature increases, means if the surroundings become very hot, their temperature will also increase. That means they will also, their body temperature will also increase, and vice versa. If the external temperature will decrease, their body temperature will also decrease. That's why we call them cold blooded, because they have to maintain their body temperature as per the surroundings. They keep on fluctuating their body temperature as per surroundings. Now there is one problem. These animals must also have some methods to avoid, let me write down, to avoid extreme cold and extreme hot temperatures. See, I said that if external temperature will increase, their body temperature will also increase. But what if external temperature will be very high? They cannot increase their temperature by 10 or 20 degrees Celsius, say for example. If external temperature is very low, that means it goes to the freezing point. They cannot reduce their body temperature to the freezing point. Although they can fluctuate their body temperature with the surroundings, but what about the extremes? What about extreme cold and extreme hot? How can they avoid such uh, situations which are very harsh? Both of these conditions, extreme hot and extreme cold, these are very harsh situations, aren't they? So how will they avoid these harsh situations? To avoid these harsh situations, these animals will show hibernation. They will show hibernation. That means if there is extreme cold, they'll go for winter sleep. Okay. And if there is extreme hotness, they will go for aestivation. These are the adaptations which these animals will show. Aestivation, which is summer sleep. So they will go for this inactive phase. Okay. During these inactive phases, the metabolic activities are very, very low. Body energy requirement is very, very low. They will perform these two adaptations. Who will perform these two adaptations, or who will show these two adaptations? Your poikilotherms, your cold-blooded animals. They will show these types of adaptations, hibernation and aestivation, to avoid extreme cold and extreme hot temperatures. Because we know extreme hot and extreme cold temperature, both situations are very harsh. Now how are they harsh? Let me make that also clear. You should know as science students that extreme hot temperature is going to damage, it's going to destroy, it's going to degrade your important enzymes. So basically in these harsh conditions, what can happen is your denaturation of proteins, so the cells of the body. So suppose if there is this cell is basically made up of what? It's in its plasma membrane, you will see what? In its plasma membrane, you will see these proteins. In its cytoplasm, the organelles are also made up of proteins. Now these proteins have some specific structure. If that structure will be, lost, we call that process denaturation. Okay. And if proteins will lose their structure, if proteins will undergo denaturation, they will not be able to perform their functions. So if the proteins will be not able to perform their functions, what will happen to the cells? The cells will die. So that's why we say that extreme hot and extreme cold conditions are very harsh, because they can result in the damage to the cells. They can cause denaturation of the proteins in the cells. So what an animal does to protect itself from this kind of situation is that the animal will show these simple adaptations. Either it will go for winter sleep if it's the cold temperature, or it will go for summer sleep. That means for a pretty long period of the time, the animal will go, the animal will enter into a cave, and it will go into a long phase of inactivation to protect itself from the external harsh conditions. So this was all which we need to understand before we can actually start our animal kingdom. So we now had this idea clear about different types of criteria, or different types of features, or different properties in which animals could vary from each other. The same things which we understood in these 9 important lectures, they will be now repeated in each and every category of animal which we'll be discussing ahead. So we have different groups of animals which we have to take up, and we'll be repeating the same things which we have understood in these 9 lectures. Somewhere we will see the animal having kind of aquatic habitat, somewhere it is having a terrestrial habitat. Some animals we'll see having asymmetric body, some having radial symmetry body, some having bilateral symmetry. You will see some having cell aggregate body plan, some having blind sac body plan, some having this tube within the tube body plan. We'll see some with cellular level of organization, some with organ level of organization, some animals with tissue level of organization. We'll see somewhere the organism will be coelomate, somewhere it will be acoelomate, somewhere it will be pseudocoelomate. Some animals will be triploblastic, some will be diploblastic, some will have one type of respiratory system, some will be homeotherms, some will be poikilotherms. So now the same terms, same points, same differences which we have understood in these 9 very important lectures, same things will be repeated for every phyla, for every group of animal kingdom. So now our animal kingdom discussion will become easy. So this was all in this lecture. The 10th lecture will be pertaining to the basic classification of animal kingdom. Till then, take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.